Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Podcast. Our guest today is Viktor Popovics. Viktor is a co-founder and president of Avendo, a fintech SaaS company bringing real-time processor competition to online merchant payments. Viktor, thank you for taking the time to chat.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me today.
Before we get into our topics, Viktor, a quick introduction about you and your business to our audience.
Yeah, I'm like you mentioned, I'm a co-founder and the president of Avendo. It's a fintech SaaS company that lets credit card processors compete in real time for different transactions for online businesses. And we're allowing basically merchants to have multiple processors, give them the best pricing in real time.
Thank you for that. We are an API company, amongst other things, and we are getting started with something in the fintech space. So that's certainly of interest to me personally and professionally, right? But before we get to that, let's start with, one of the three topics that we had actually chosen, right? A bit of a personal intro that you had shared with me before we hit record. Do you want to just share that and then we can start the conversation there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from former Yugoslavia. My life really, all sides. My father passed 17, and then just a few months later, the civil war broke out in Yugoslavia, and I had to make the decision: stay or participate in a war, or not take part and leave. And I chose the latter, so left for a neighboring country north of Yugoslavia into Hungary. And initially, I stayed there as a refugee, and it was quite humbling experience. Moving into a country where you don't speak the language, you don't know the systems, you have no friends, you don't have network, no work experience, and we had to figure out. My wife, well, back then my girlfriend from high school, today my wife, we had to strap down and figure things out along the way. And we thought we were going to go back to Yugoslavia once the war is over, but that didn't happen. We ended up staying 4 years, and then opportunity in late '90s came along to come to United States and study here, which I was very happy about. So graduated in 2002. Unfortunately, after 9/11, the aviation was in a bad spot. My background as far as work experience and education at that point was aviation management, and how and like they just said, yes, I'm ready.
Why not, huh? Yeah.
Why not? Yeah. And so I came up with a list of about 40 products related to aviation industry because the idea was to go into e-commerce. And my friend ran a keyword analysis. Now we're talking about 2003, very early stages of e-commerce, and he found out that anything with word pressure had a very high number of searches. Because one of the products that I listed was these surface pressure cleaners for cleaning hangar floors. And he says, well, why don't we focus on pressure washers and pressure sprayers? And if it doesn't work out, we can go back to the original idea of the aviation parts. Well, it worked out. Fast forward 2017, Google changed the algorithm. So we pretty much overnight lost our traffic, organic traffic. I never advertised on Google before. At that point, we had to figure something out. So I bought out my partner because he didn't want to continue, and I had to pivot. I hired a consultant and pretty much invested myself and the company. Everything was put onto Amazon, and then a few years later, we really were able to become a seller authority in our category in pressure washing and water technology category. So come 2024, after 21 years, I made a decision to sell the business because I've understood that nothing lasts forever. And once my sales stabilized and I wanted to sell the company in a good spot, so somebody younger, maybe with more ideas and better ideas could carry it to the next stage. And that's what happened. So 2024, I sold the business. And just recently, about a year ago, I started Avendo, a fintech SaaS company, which is completely different from e-commerce, but we can go into the details as well.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. There's a number of things to unpack there. There's one thing you said. You said nothing lasts forever. As cliched as it might sound, we know, it means quite a bit, right? I want to talk a little bit about that, but I also want to talk about, Mark Zuckerberg had one of my favorite videos of his from, I don't know, not too long ago. He said that ideas are never fully formed. people think that they are fully formed. Meta is a company that's hiring AI engineers for like hundreds of millions of dollars, right? They bought Scale AI, I think for, I don't know, maybe $1 billion or something not too long ago. Like Alexander Wong, who's running the company now as part of Meta. So I just give a random example there because when you look at all of that, in my mind, sometimes I'm like, you know what? Mark must know what he's doing, right? Meta must know what they're doing. But we know from the past that's not necessarily true, right? Metaverse was like like a billion or multi-billion-dollar disaster. Hopefully they're reporting earnings on Wednesday and hopefully things go all right this time around. But the reason I want to mention that, Victor, is ideas. As somebody who's running this company for many years now, I know that they're never fully formed. Yet, when you go to pitch and you go to sell at every stage of whatever it is that you're building, you have to, I don't want to use the word pretend, but I don't know what else to say there, right? Part of our learning in sales has been that we just say it as it is and then we recognize that maybe we should word that slightly differently or something along those lines. So given that random set of things that I mentioned there, my first question to you is, what are some of the sales related challenges that you ran into? You mentioned that probably you were in this aviation, you want to be in that space, you ended up doing something else. So perhaps not something that you had studied back in college, for instance. So what was that first sale? How did that first sale look like? How prepared were you and what did you encounter during the process of making that first sale and the very first dollar?
You're 100% right. You plan and you want to follow through the plan, but you might as well throw that plan out of the window because it rarely works, right? I'll give you an example. When in e-commerce business that I started, I would have never thought that the hardest part would be to find vendors, manufacturers that would trust us to sell their equipment online. Now, remind you, this is back in 2003 when e-commerce was just a very beginning infancy, right? And we would call vendors different. It's like, what do you mean you're going to sell it online? Because back in the day, you used to sell them. They would have regional reps. These reps would load the equipment into a van, and then they would drive around the city to make certain stops, pull out the machine, hook up the garden hose, and demo it. That's how you used to sell pressure washers. And that with e-commerce changed. So these guys, manufacturers, old school guys, smart guys, but they're like, we don't know what to. What do you mean sell? How are you going to demo? What are you going? And so it took me 6 months to convince the first vendor, a company called Camspray out of Iowa, to believe us that this is possible. And the first sale, of course I will remember it. It came actually from a military base, U.S. military base in San Diego. And they ordered a cold water diesel-powered pressure washer. It was a call. They came in, says, we're interested in this. How much is the shipping? I gave them a quote, and it was pretty swift, pretty quick. And something similar is happening now with Avendo. I thought that the sales process would be where I need to worry about, and that everybody will be on board, like the gateways, the payment processors, the acquisition banks, that all of these will align because the idea is great. Like, why not? Man, was I wrong. It's actually the hardest part is getting payment processors to change the way they think, because they have been doing the same way, this business, for the last 50, 60 years, right? They come to a merchant, they evaluate it, they look at the statements, they assess the risk and say, okay, this is your rate, let's go. So now, we're introduced to basically a new category. And they don't understand that now, they have to actually compete for those merchants on a transaction type basis. And so that was a lot harder. And really, just as far as the sales for Avendo, I'm myself surprised. You tell them one sentence. Usually, you have to reach the decision makers or the owners of the company, and you say what we do, and it's competition. You're going to benefit from multiple rates at the transactional level, and it clicks for them immediately because they know if they can save 1% on whatever $1 million business process that they process, that's huge savings, and it immediately affects the bottom line with the net margin. So it's completely opposite. You can hope for one thing, you can plan it, but man, you better be ready to switch on the go.
So let's talk about that a bit more, right? So let's come to the second part of your life where you're doing this current business. So you had an idea in mind, you decided you want to go about solving that problem. there's many ways to sort of skin that cat. We've ourselves done it a few different ways. But, people tell you, hey, do all of your research, do a lot of the product market fit and spend a lot of time and energy and effort on that before you end up building a lot. Build some, make sure there is some traction, that the industry, the world seems to have a need for something like that before you spend more time and more energy. That's one story that I've heard repeatedly. On the other side, all of this from very successful founders of the past, right? I've heard, I don't remember the names, I don't want to quote them incorrectly, but it's all of these popular big companies, essentially, software companies. Heard one of them say, you know what, don't worry about product market fit because you never know. You're going to have to start building something. Just you have an idea, you have the ability to build it, you have the skills, go start doing it in smaller phases, launch it, see how it goes, make adjustments, tweak it, and keep chugging along. Meaning you're not spending too much time or any time trying to find product market fit. Now, these are two ends of the spectrum, and these are all businesses that have done quite well. Now, that tells me that there's no singular right answer to success. I wish there were a silver bullet, but history and my own experience tells me that it's anything but the truth. So how do you go about doing this, Victor? How much do you try to find out before you do the things? And how much do you defer or delay the inevitable to find out after you've had something fairly substantial to actually be able to sell?
Sure, yeah. Before really launching our marketing campaigns, and then we decided to go, I believe it was 7 or 8 different campaigns, anywhere from cold email marketing, referral partnerships, obviously, advertising, Google ads and such. It's a really fine balance. You may attempt something and you may discover something that you didn't think of. For instance, we were going, I'm not going to name, but it's a software we use for cold emailing, and turns out that the database that they have from which we are pulling these cold leads or emails is sort of obsolete, right? Even though we were spending quite a bit of money to get these leads, you realize that you're getting no responses, so you have to pivot, so you find a secondary, right? So you get surprises along the way, and you have to be able to track these things. You have to be able to be alert and make the adjustments timely, because you may say, okay, with cold emails, all right, maybe it's the template, maybe it's the subject line that we need to change. You're trying all kinds of different things. Maybe our emails got blacklisted, so you're changing that. You're doing another warm-up round of about 4 to 6 weeks. So there's so many different things that you have to do and try before you actually decide to switch. But it's just trial and error. I think that's the bottom line. I don't think there's a secret to it or a crystal ball you can look at and say, oh, okay, yeah, I need to go from here to here. Let's do it this way. So yeah, we're trying many different venues as far as the marketing. For our type of business, we're discovering that referral partnerships, such as, for instance, we're focusing on 3 groups there for business consultants and coaches, fractional CFOs, and accounting firms, because they understand the net margins and it's easy for them to refer their clients to us. And we also have a program where we're referring, of course, with the acknowledgement and approval from our clients, and sending those potential leads to our partners. So yeah, it's just trial and error, trying different things, not be afraid to tweak it, change it, scrap it, throw it away if it needs to be done that way. Just be prepared. It's not gonna go as planned.
You said it very nicely. One more time, the sequence of those words might sound like you might have heard it before, but I want to tell people, when I hear it from folks who've done it and have actually felt it, as somebody who's going through those phases myself, right, and us at the company, it actually resonates very well. I cannot express that in words necessarily, how it resonates, but even these things that I would have, when I read these things back in college, Victor, about try till you, try and try till you succeed, or trial and error, or, things don't last forever. All of these seem like just English phrases, right, that you just read. But when you run a company, you actually start to feel the pain of those phrases, and you know why someone designed those, right? Who coined those phrases, and it actually means a lot. I want to talk about trial and error, because in our campaigns, for whatever it is that we are selling, let's say APIs, that's what we've been focusing on currently. we continue to try a variety of different sales models. Some work, some not so well, and we make those adjustments. If you ask me to do a 1 hour lesson on all the things that worked or did not work or how I might recommend that somebody does it, I think I might do a fairly decent job. But if you ask me to take those learnings and put them into practice and show that in real time execution, I'll be honest with you, that's going to fall much shorter compared to the actual 1 hour course that I could have possibly created. You know what I mean? What I mean by that is the theory of what you learn and the practicality of when you put those things into practice. There seems to be a pretty big gap between the two, right? What you learn in school and learn in college versus when you go to the real world and do the executions. So how do you sort of bridge that? And what I mean by that question specifically is, let's say somebody is listening to this or watching this and they're either getting out of college or in the early stages of running a business. You tend to take your learnings from these books and theory and all of that and try to blindly put that into practice because it worked for this person. They built a great company, so I'm sure it's going to work for me as well, right? But that's not necessarily the case, or it's far from the truth, because your business is different, your problem is different, the race that you're running specifically is different, your challenges are different, your upbringing is different, everything is different. I want to get your thoughts on that. How do you take your learnings from books and theory, but when you start to apply those learnings in your real business, what kind of caution do you exercise before you put them into practice?
Yeah, that could be a long answer. As far as the books, one thing I remember, going through education in the United States is what helped me a lot was situational exercises and experiences that certain teachers shared. And we're all different. We're built differently, right? Different students seek different things. I remember going on a break and one of the students says, "Oh, this class is so boring. He's constantly talking about what he does at work and how he handles this, how he handles that." And I'm like, I love it. It's a gold mine. Because I'm like learning what he had failed at. And it's like we don't have to go through that. So, we perceive things differently. So, education, I mean, it'll give you the grind, because if you go through 4 year or whatever, if you go masters, even longer, it's a commitment, resilience. While your friends are maybe working and making money and going out, you have to study, and so it's perseverance, teamwork. You learn that in school. Those are the skills you may not necessarily say, "Oh, I learned that," but you really do. Compromises. If you have some group projects in the class, you have to learn how to compromise. Leadership, if you're a leader in one of the groups. So those are little kind of pioneering steps that we may just ignore at the beginning, but that shapes you as a person. And so take that with you when you go to job or start your business, and just like you're saying, when you're in it, you have to be willing to try different things. For instance, with payment processors, I told you I thought it's gonna be breeze, because it's a great idea. Why wouldn't they love this idea? We ended up changing like 7 or 8 pitches, different ways of saying things, so that we could cover the blind spots and things that they were bringing up as concerns or rejections, until it started to click. So you just have to find different things that will overcome that problem. Don't get discouraged. It's not like, "Oh, okay, he said yes." Well, it doesn't mean the next person will say yes. That company might be in a different situation. They might be hungrier for the business, and they might, agree to some of the terms that otherwise they wouldn't, or some other companies wouldn't. So I know it's hard. There's a lot of, disappointments that come along when you go and fail. I don't know. I think just the life built me into this. I don't think I was born with this. I think it's just circumstance in life built that perseverance, and I think I'm probably a little bit more numb than average when it comes to these rejections. I just like, okay, well, not him. Let's go and tweak something. Do it this way. Do it that. And so, like I said, don't get discouraged. Keep discovering. Keep uncovering different angles, how you can attack, and keep at it.
You mentioned grind. I want to talk about grind, right? That's very important to run a business. There are many days I wake up thinking I should take a vacation and go find work. Literally finding work and working for somebody at one point in life becomes vacation when you're running your own company, because it just is a whole lot more difficult. So let's talk about grind. I'm going to quote another one of my favorite CEOs, probably my all-time favorite, not because he's wealthy or he runs the world's largest company, just because I've always liked Jensen Huang, even before Nvidia was the company, right? He just seems like like one of those really nice people. He talked about the grind in one of the podcasts, I think, where he said, people always glorify loving and enjoying what you do, and you should not do it otherwise, right? If you love what you do, you love your work, you're not working at all or whatnot. He says there are many phases in your work life where you actually may not like what you're doing. I mean, he's speaking from this point of a founder, not so much an employee of somebody, but that being said, he says there could be long periods of time, Victor, where you actually don't particularly enjoy those little things that you do, but you're working towards the greater good, right? Because you have your objective in mind, you like the whole business, you kind of like where you want to be at a certain point of time, but perhaps not so much the journey. Right, so the dichotomy there is, on one side you hear enjoy the journey, right? The destination is unimportant in life, the journey is all that's important. Who cares what happens? You just have to enjoy every single day, the present, not the past, not the future. All those gurujis and everything, makes sense. But on this side, someone like Jensen Huang says, well, you know what? There are going to be long periods of time where you absolutely hate what you're doing, but if you believe in the greater good, you have to chug along. Where do you stand?
Excellent question. For me, I've learned to celebrate the little wins. And this came from when I really was at a point that I may have to throw in the towel in 2017 when Google's famous Penguin update came out, and we were top 3 on all organic search pages for pretty much any keyword that you can think of on pressure washing and power washing. And then we became page 2, 3, or no page. And everybody knows when you're page 2, you don't exist pretty much because nobody goes there. That's when I learned to come and be kind of on a ground level and celebrate the little wins. Hiring an employee, like, oh, we really needed somebody in this role. Let's celebrate that, right? Little things. I remember when it was such a a dark time and in a tough spot. Again, I have to refer back to, because it was really. I told my wife, I said, I might have to go back to 9 to 5 job if I don't recover this, because I had to pivot. I had to get a bigger space now, because I went from drop shipping business model to now Amazon, which is inventory business really. So I needed a bit more space, so 10 times bigger space. I went from $50,000 in inventory to $500,000 in inventory. Learn how to package. You have to learn everything that Amazon wants you to do. You can't just, getting new software, inventory management, order management software. And boy, I tell you, some of those things I hated. I didn't want to learn that. I just didn't. It was like, oh my God, I had a successful business, ran it for many years, had employees, people were doing their task and their projects and their work, and I was involved, but now I had to start over and I had to learn all the moving pieces, and then hire the right people. We ended up hiring a consultant, writing the new SOPs, and it wasn't fun. And that's when I learned. So even now, even though I'm a whole lot more enjoying Avendo, the credit card processing business, because it's an idea that I came from while I was in the other business. So Ultimate Washer and the pressure washing industry was like great, but it wasn't like I was in love with it. So I couldn't really like enjoy it per se. But this with credit card processing, I'm having fun with it, and I'm designing it now. I'm designing the business. I say it's like 1,000-foot bird view, and I'm looking down. I'm designing. When I started Ultimate Washer, it was like, we need a task management tool. Okay, grab this. We need the inventory management system. Okay, grab that. And then at the end of like 10, 12 years, I ended up with 7 different product databases, which was humongous. Having a web designer or somebody in the company to update every time we get a price catalog update from a vendor we have to update all 7 databases, or we have to change the price in one place. We have to change it in all 7. So you'll learn from these, mistakes. And so now that's completely different. Now I'm thinking about, like, is this tool communicating with this tool? If this goes down, can I replace it? Is it agnostic? That'll communicate with the other 4. So it's a lot more designing and planning now, which is harder, but it'll be much better later for scalability and automation. And that's my goal. Like, I want to be able to scale to go from 1 million to 10 million to 100 million without needing to replace everything. And so that's why it's harder in that way. But small wins, I think, is something that carries you through. Like, if you have that goal, like you said, if you have that goal that's too far out, it may seem unachievable. Like, oh my God, I still have all this. But you say, oh, I've accomplished this. Okay, that's a win. We're gonna go and maybe have a drink, or maybe have bring lunch for everybody in the office, or just little things so that people notice that there's progress made. That's how I deal with it.
I agree. I think enjoying the little victories, I think, it keeps you going, right? It keeps you going. It gives you that excitement. You're feeling happy and nurtured, and then you sort of chug along. Let's talk about, I want to talk about resilience, but before that, you mentioned things hardly ever go according to plans, right? That's just the truth. That's just the nature of the beast. And I also mentioned what Mark Zuckerberg had said about ideas don't come fully formed. So in your experience, Victor, when you're starting to do something new, it doesn't have to be something huge like building a new business. Even like in software, I'm talking about a new feature, right? Maybe a small feature, maybe a big feature. It doesn't matter. When you're starting to do those things, how much do you think happens? I mean, this is a very broad question, but I'll get to the essence of it, right? How much do you generally think happens according to plan? Meaning, how much time and effort in terms of percentage do you even recommend that people spend before they start doing those activities? Before they actually, it could be, hey, do all the prep work, spend a lot of time, a lot of energy is one way to go about it. The other extreme is do no preparation, nothing whatsoever, jump right in. Somewhere in the middle seems to be a simple and straightforward answer, but more specifically, how have you seen it pan out for you? How much planning do you do upfront versus later, and how do you see it work out one way or the other?
Great question. I guess, unfortunately for me, I'm a perfectionist. I'm very detailed, and I plan. I think, the person, who was my coach and a mentor for a while, he says, Victor, 80% is planning and 20% is execution. And that is so true. If you plan it correctly, making it happen, I don't want to say it's like a breeze, but it's you just follow what you've planned out, and you just trust the process. Go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, go down the list. For me, I started with heavy planning for Avendo back in October, so just less than a year. October, November, in many different directions. A lot has changed, a lot. And you asked me to put a percentage. I would say 70% of what I planned is not the same. But believe it or not, it helped me understand my business better and what I'm getting into. I thought I knew credit card processing when I started, because coming from merchant side, you kind of have this, relationship with whoever you're processing, and you understand the chargebacks, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's nothing. This is so layered, the payment industry, with network fees and acquiring banks and issuing banks and this card and type card and this the other type, government cards, gift cards. I mean, everything is different, and so many risk factors. So quite a bit has changed since I started the plan, but it really made me dive into the areas I was forced. By digging and trying to figure things out. Even just as simple as, is this innovative enough? Can we file a provisional patent around this idea? So reading about that, what's the difference, provisional versus non-provisional, right? Which one's better? How much you're protecting? How much you're not protecting? And so it was very early, but I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand what I'm getting into, because do I just jump into it and don't seek any protection? Am I going to spend too much money on the attorney's fees and application fees? Is that worth it? You have to sort of make some of these decisions early, and at the same, like I said, you're learning in depth about your industry more than you probably need at that moment, but it's necessary so you can evolve.
Lovely. I want to talk about focus. You mentioned focus there. Just to set the context here, focus is very important because there's a lot of noise. There a lot of things are happening in the world, in your life, and in the micro and the macro world of things. So focus is key, right? Fair enough. But I want to ask you if there's a downside to focus, and here's what I mean by that. In my, we are currently in our fourth category of products, right? We started with a project management app. On the web, we built a mobile app, and then we did an education platform. They're all live right now, and then we're working on APIs, and we have a bunch of them live, right? 4 different product categories. And along the way in this journey, Victor, there are times where I have to be more focused than otherwise, meaning a window of 6 weeks where I think about nothing else, breathe nothing else. Swami Vivekananda, one of the people from years ago, my wife's favorite person, he said that, when you have an idea, whatever it is that you're doing, every muscle in your body needs to think. I'm just paraphrasing what he said loosely, but you got to feel it. All parts of you needs to feel that for you to be able to execute on that. So when I've spent many weeks like that, completely undistracted, focusing on a problem, the problem that I need to solve. And then eventually, at some point, say 6 weeks after, or maybe 8 weeks, whatever the time frame is, you solve that problem, you feel good about it, small victories you've gotten past. Now, the downside of that approach, I've also seen is 6 weeks is a long time, and in the world of AI today, 6 weeks is almost like 6 years, right? I'm just talking 2 years, 3 years ago, but still, the question is, I think, still valid to some extent. By focusing on that and not thinking about what else is happening, you lose touch with things that are relevant to what you're doing, right? I might be building a feature that I need to anyways do. Perhaps something has changed in the world of things. You mentioned a Google algorithm changing where things change dramatically. If you were focused on doing something else at the time that relied on the previous versions of those Google algorithms, then the 6 to 8 weeks you would have spent in this focused manner may actually have been detrimental to the business as opposed to helping the business. It's kind of a loosely worded question, but if the essence of what I'm asking makes sense, Victor, do you see the downsides? Is there a downside to being overly focused where you have to be able to digest the noise of the world while you are actually chugging along with doing things that mean more to you? Or should you cut things out? How would you approach this, or what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the key would be delegating in this case. And I myself, I'm not a developer, I'm not a coder, so I certainly wouldn't dive into a situation where I have to be 100% focused on just one thing at a time. But I know what you're saying because I've had instances where we had the greatest idea, talking about my previous business, and you think now your sales are gonna double. If we just do this one thing, our sales are gonna double. Like we're gonna rock it. And that can bring somewhat of a complacency. And that happened to me where I don't say you check out, but you feel comfortable enough where you lose the focus. You started that question with the focus. And so if you are either too much focused on a project and you're just honing in on that one thing and you don't hear the outside signals or see the signals, or if you're in a situation like me where you become too comfortable with what your team is building and you just relax a little too long, a little too much, that can catch up. So I agree with you. I don't think checking out of what the world is doing around you or competitors, I think you should still have a pulse on it and follow through, whether it's through attending trade shows or reading newsletters or listening to podcasts inside your industry. I think it's key to not to completely be unaware of the surrounding.
Learning from mistakes. You mentioned, we all make mistakes, plenty. I've made a lot more than other people maybe, but, along the way when you're running a business. So, they say the smartest people probably don't make any mistakes. Unfortunately, I don't know any of them. They say the next category of people make mistakes but learn from their mistakes. I want to believe I'm in that category, but I'm not sure. The third is you never learn from other people's mistakes or your mistakes, right? Let's say broadly 3 categories. Now, the base assumption in this categorization, in my opinion, Victor, is that you actually can benefit from other people's mistakes and what you learn. I'm sure you can. I'm not denying that. But the base assumption perhaps is a little bit flawed, because if each of us is running our own race, and if each of us has our own unique background, right? You grew up in Yugoslavia. I grew up in India. The 2 of us, at this point, I believe we live in the US or have a business here. But there's a lot of things we've learned along the way that is unique to each of us. But there's other things we would have learned that's similar in many ways, possibly, right? Maybe running a business, maybe some of the challenges of running a business. So if there's so much uniqueness to each of our lives, both personally and professionally, are we doing a disservice to ourselves by actually trying to learn from other people's mistakes? Because perhaps those mistakes may not apply to us. Perhaps the things that they did right may not apply to us, and now we are overly bogged down by other people's things that they did right or wrong, that we are now spending less time focusing on things that we could possibly be doing right or wrong.
Yes, I can tell you that the experiences that I had with Ultimate Washer apply, or the mistakes that I had apply very little to this business. I think the key is when people discuss mistakes and say, read this book or read that article or listen to this speaker. I don't think people really want you to say, okay, this is what happened to this person. This is how he handled it. I think it's more about the concept, where you see the problem and it could be similar to what somebody has gone through, but try to structure it similarly, or the outcome or the solution or the result, and seek in similar manner. So the concept, almost like a skeleton, you can follow that, but I don't think you can follow all the steps, because like you said, no problem is the same problem, because they might be having XYZ vendor, you are having someone else, the cooperation that you're getting from your partner is different from the cooperation, different companies getting from their partner. So, the you can have an issue, you can have and say, it may sound like a same problem, but I think you have to go about different ways for solving it and finding the solution that pertains to your particular problem. But concepts, I think, thinking about in a broad scheme of things, I think you can still do that.
What are some things that, as years go by, we change as people, the world changes and we change as well with it, like it or not. So we do, for the same type of problems, Victor, I've seen that I approach them slightly differently. Maybe I'm taking slightly lesser risks as I'm getting older. Maybe not. Maybe my approach to solving that exact same problem has changed because the technology has changed today, because I have to be addressing it differently. We have to do it differently. Or because I've learned other things along the way that tells me that I need to do this differently from how I've done it in the past, right? Learning from either things we did right or things we didn't do that much. So you approach things differently. What are some things that you that you could say with certainty that you're doing differently over the years based on some learnings? And along the same lines, what are some things that you feel like you're not doing differently because you don't want to do it differently, or because you strongly feel like those are your tenets, that those are your traits, and you don't want for them to change, or maybe they cannot be changed because there is only so much each of us can actually change, despite what the world might require of us. So 2 parts to it, right? What are some things that you might be doing differently today than you might have done in the past, and what are some things that you're probably doing the exact same way and you expect to be doing the exact same way even in years to come?
You're really making me dig deep here.
I'll promise you, I didn't intend for this to be a philosophical session, but when you talk sales, I've learned over the years, Victor, that sales is both art and science. It's just not numbers and signs and sending 1,000 emails doesn't do it. Sometimes you got to send those two good emails to those two right people to get that stuff done. So as an engineer, I always try to quantify things because it makes life easier. But I've learned it, for good or bad, that there is more art to engineering than I wanted to admit previously, right? So I've come to terms with that fact, and I think sales is one place where I think art plays a significant role along with science, which is why a lot of my questions might sound philosophical, but they clearly have an engineering side to it, I promise you.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Going back to your question was what am I keeping and what is it that I've changed?
Exactly. Yeah.
I definitely changed. Well, first off, I gotta share with you my background so you understand, or your listeners can understand where I'm coming from. When you grow up in a communism or socialism, you're taught to make money and then you're able to spend it. In most Western countries, especially the United States, you can get a credit. If the investors or the bank trusts that you can return that money to them with interest, they'll lend it to you. And so this is where I've learned that it's okay to borrow, even though you may not, it might be, a pre-revenue company. Maybe, you have to put, get a loan that against your house or, borrow money from friends. But I think I've become more in that way flexible. And I understand that investing into a company initially, obviously you have to trust the idea is good and trust you're going to have good processes and work hard at it. So that's something I definitely changed over the years, even from my ultimate washer business. What I haven't changed, I guess, what I haven't changed is things that I dislike doing. I probably would dislike doing them forever. Accounting or bookkeeping. I remember my first business partner. He was a CPA, and in our early days, first months, he's like, let me show you how you reconcile these bank statements. I don't want to learn bookkeeping. So bookkeeping and HR. Those are the two probably the biggest areas that I'm just in love with, and I probably never will be. And so I understand it to the extent that I need to understand it as a business owner, to look at the reports and statements and such. But doing day-to-day ledgers, ain't gonna happen.
Accepting limitations is I've learned that it's a key part of not just life but running a business for sure, right? I mean, I've learned, in my personal opinion, Victor, I think I've learned a lot more by running this company Snowpal than any other way in life. Not my 8 years in college, not many years of just living life or working for great companies, but just running a startup, doing all of it has taught me many different things. So, but before I go, I know we got about 12 minutes to go. I want to give you an opportunity. I have a couple of more things to ask you, but anything that you want to ask me. I have one non-technical question to ask you. Usually I push it to the end, but maybe I'll ask right now and then save my other questions and then give you time to ask. My non-technical, meaning unrelated to the topic question I generally ask of almost all my guests is, say you're going out for dinner, you've got to order a nice meal. It doesn't have to be from the same cuisine, but what would be your order for an appetizer? It's got to be one dish in each of these categories: an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert. What would those three things be?
Appetizer, probably fried calamari.
Okay.
Main course, coming from the Balkans, we eat meat with the meat. So it could be anything, it doesn't have to be heavy, it doesn't have to be a beef, but it could be chicken, but it could be pasta as well. But usually a lot of carbs will be the main course. Desserts, I'm very picky on, believe it or not. I'm an ice cream guy and I'm a chocolate guy. So if they have one of those two, not likely chocolate, but yeah, maybe ice cream, then I'll probably have that.
Perfect. Okay, now before I go to my last couple of questions, and I've thrown a bunch at you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to answering those. The reason I try to keep them fairly generic when it came to sales, Victor, is because depending on what you're selling, you're doing things a little bit differently. But I know the tenets, the fundamental tenets of every part of a business. I don't see that necessarily change. Whether you're selling potatoes or software or hardware or semiconductors, there's a number of things that does change. But how you approach sales, probably this is commonalities, at least from what I've seen, which is why I try to keep them generic, because say a listener is going to sell X versus Y versus Z, hopefully they gain from everything that you've shared with us here. So much appreciate your thoughts. So before I go to my last couple of questions, do you have anything that you would like to ask me?
What keeps you up at night?
Way too many things, but I'll tell you one or two things. As we work on the current products and try to sell them, the challenges of sales certainly keeps me up. As somebody who was pretty much an engineer growing up, and that's what I did for a living at work as well, sales was never something I thought I had to worry about. So when I went and started the business, I'm like, we're going to build some great products, and we did, and we continue to do. And I felt like people are going to break through the front door and steal it, but that's not the case. I've learned that doesn't happen. So you're going to have to spend your energies in selling. And as much as I've studied back in college about sales and marketing, I've realized that there's a complete disconnect between the books and the execution, which is kind of why I asked you one of those questions. Sales certainly keeps me up at night as to what should be done for whatever it is that we've built and are building. The second thing that keeps me up at night, I think, is when it comes to the business, is we have so many of these ideas that on a weekly or a daily basis, when you wake up and I'm like, oh my God, this is a phenomenal idea. Why did I not think about this like 10 years ago? And then the younger me actually would have gone about building it for a week or two and having something working, because that was just what I did for a living. There's nothing wrong in that, but you're going to have a bunch of dead repositories in GitHub that make no sense. And we have plenty of those that have never seen the light of day. But as I've gotten older and as times become more precious with whatever it is that we're doing, I know that these great ideas at 9 o'clock in the morning become not so great by 5 in the evening. And then 3 days after, they become almost silly. And then a month later, I'm like, why in the world would I even have thought about such a thing? It was such a stupid thing to have thought about, right? So that's what keeps me up at night, because it's not so much the lack of ideas. I always thought that would be a problem, not knowing what to do next. But as it turns out, Victor, the problem is less what to do next. The problem is there's so much to do next, but I don't have the time, the money, or the resources to do even a small percentage of those. So picking the right one or two things to actually seriously work on next has been a challenge. It's continued to be a challenge. And what keeps me up, the second thing at night, is not picking the wrong thing to build. It's not because I don't back myself or my team to be able to build that. That's less of a problem. The interesting problem here is we know we can end up building that, but it may not make any sense to build it because you would have spent time and money and we may not be able to sell it. So the second thing that keeps me up at night is, what is it that I should not be building, right? So we don't end up wasting that time and money. And hopefully that makes sense.
Hearing you say these things, I can tell you right now, you are on the right track. Having idea is a million times better than having no ideas. Have you looked into maybe bringing in a business coach? Because they can really help you hone in on what the core issues are. If you're running a list and like, I have this and this and this, and you kind of have tendency to want to do them all, or and then you realize, okay, it wasn't the best one. I think a business coach or consultant can help you really cherry pick the best ones. Just 2 cents.
Yep, no, thank you for that. I have one or two things to ask you. Anything else you want to ask me?
No, yeah, it's just I think you shared a great deal with that question, so I appreciate that.
No worries. You've done a fair bit of travel. I say fair, but I think it's quite a bit of travel. We are in the current age of AI, and what you don't want to be doing because some other tool can do it better, faster, quicker, cheaper, maybe not cheaper, but whatnot. In your travels and in your experiences, Victor, living in Florida, being born and raised in Yugoslavia, being in Vienna right now, what are some things that you're learning from the culture that tells you that even if the problems that you're solving are the same, the different cultures would be solving them very differently? Like if you ran the exact same business, not in Florida, but in Austria, maybe not in Austria, but in Yugoslavia. Maybe not in Yugoslavia, but in India. Given your travels, how differently do you think you might have to approach the business given the cultures that you're living in?
Well, I'll tell you, very different, right? In like, for instance, in Serbia and all these former Yugoslav republics, Croatia and Montenegro, and it's having a credit card is nearly unheard of. Everybody is running on debit cards, and they're still so much far behind in online shopping. I, I would say at least 15 years. I mean, they're probably now around where we were in US around 2010. Just the mentality is not there, that because they don't have the same type of security as far as the credit card fraud. Like if somebody steals the credit card transaction, I mean, steals the credit card and uses it in Europe, you are still responsible for any transactions up to that point, up to the point you reported the card. In the US, they'll go back 6 months and say, "Oh yeah, this is fraud, this is fraud, this," and you, as a consumer, you'll get your money back. So that's why we're so unafraid in the US to use a credit card online, because you have no risk as a consumer. That's not the same in Europe. And so I think they have long ways. They also pay high in credit card fees when it comes to credit card processing and the business that I'm in. But it would definitely be a different type of approach when if we decide to expand into Europe or other parts of the world.
Thanks to Viktor Popovics, I was the co-founder and president of Avendo, a fintech SaaS company. So we'll include the link to your company and your profile, Viktor. Much appreciate your time. That being said, your closing comment, and then we'll call it wraps.
Yeah, you can find us on Avendo.tech. If you want to reach out to me, by all means, I'm an open book. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's the best way. And yeah, if you're one of the three partner groups that we're looking to partner with, like I mentioned earlier, with fractional CFOs, accounting firms, or business coaches, please reach out, and I would like to talk to you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Viktor. Much appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.